the opposite. Some managers don't have the knowledge. So you have to think and rethink about your organization, how it works. Because some managers manage on a high when the trend is upwards. They're good at that. But when the trends are down, they cannot. They just fail. So we need to think about manage and knowledge. The other thing which is also important, understand or practice global business connectivity. How does that work? Why does it work? And what does it mean? Because these are critical factors of how people really to understand the world of business. Because it has a driving force between political, economical, and the transformation which is going on. Furthermore, many people know today that the biggest downfall of the industry, of any industry in fact, is the banks, without saying. Because banks stopped participating in economic growth. They are no longer lending, they're exiting many sectors, and they're creating many problematic, even for successful business, exist in the world. Why? Because they're changing, that's it. You know, history showed that banks cannot be the driving force anymore. It's unfortunate, it must not happen, it should never happen, but this is the fact. So what's happening now is the world debt, when you look at it, is almost, incredibly too much. 230 billion and beyond. The world GDP cannot sustain this. When you have such huge debt, it just doesn't happen. So things are shaking up. And this cannot change. It's just amazingly will not change. So there is a world debt which is too huge, and there is a GDP which cannot bring that to a potential evolution. Global shipping also is suffering from IMO ridiculous, in my view, action or so-called environmental activity. I think it's different to look into the environment and cleaner seas rather than thinking how to make it as business. And they are looking at this as a business rather than anything. There are facts and realities. So imagine if there is a global potential that the shipping fleet may have about up to 60 billion of fuel shock in the coming years. We're talking about 2019, 2020, and beyond that also. These are important to understand what's happening there. Clearly, the bottom line on this, there is no such a fuel that can meet the requirement of the IMO, period. It doesn't exist. It will not exist. I worked in oil for 26 years. I know exactly what I'm talking about. No refining company will go to that extent of refining and cracking process. It's too costly. And the product in the end is not good enough. Because nobody, it's different testing laboratory work and action work. And I think the scientist who put this thought, he needs his head to be examined somehow. Because it doesn't work that way. Lower emission does not mean I have to find a fuel that can run in a lower emission environment. It just doesn't work. But the reality of the matter, what's coming out, if the refiners cannot get you the fuel, okay, so you cannot meet, as a shipper, you cannot meet this. What they tell you in the end, that is really the catch. I want you to use scrubber. I have a business to run here. I want everybody to pay for this. The reality of the matter, it's a strange environment where if the law to be practiced, you're supposed to go to the oil producers first, see how far they can get you cleaner oil, cleaner driving for, product. Then you implement. But you don't do a mediocre, I'm not going to be worried about that and I'm going to find the scrubbers or whatever. who knows what the scrubber will do? And we know that there are different types and different options, and some ships cannot fit these scrubbers because they have different sizes or wherever. But the question is, there is a law, and that law has a specific thing, requirement, lower sulfur or lower emission. And the fuel that exists cannot be attained. So, I don't know, people, even if that fuel is attained at one stage, you have to pay heavy, heavy money for it. It's going to cost you a lot of money. Furthermore, the toughest on this is, can shipper in today's environment spend an amount up to $4 million or so dollars to fix the emission process? Can they? The reality of the matter, I think I know at least many of the shippers and tycoons, they decided we're not going to do this. To hell with it, we'll pay the fines. Because it doesn't make sense. I cannot guarantee it has the value that I'm told to be produced. Plus, the market is down. Remember, few years ago, maybe the freight is 30. Today is 9, 8, or 10. So you're talking about a huge change in the freight rates. So these things, I think the critical part, I believe in today's discussion you will have and tomorrow, these are the type of subject which is hot at this moment. Because implementation is coming, such implementation will affect things. I hope that many countries will push the IMO to defer such a decision or the implementation timing in order to have a better environment and economical recovery that people can afford such a thing. Because maybe the big companies may go for it because they know exactly what will happen. Many of the smaller or medium companies will disappear, they will take over. This is a normal process, but it's not a fair trade process. And I think when you have an IMO which represents the whole globe, it should think of the whole globe rather than a sector or a part of the globe as they do. Global seaborne will be increasing, of course, and we've seen this change. Still, there is a movement upwards in the global, and we've seen some of it is actually very positive in many ways, especially when you think of the potential 2.7 which is reached. People were thinking it's going to be a harder time. Is 2017 a better year? No. The shock is still there. It existed from 2018. It will not change. As simple as that. Things just will not change. Because the debt level is too huge. The environment that's supposed to support the debt level change is out, which is the banks and institution of funding. And therefore, environment continue to drive itself. Can you sustain your business is the modem. Can you retain the customers you have today is potentially yes and no. And can you keep growing or at least creating opportunities. There are a number of things which are critical when you look at the global sea trade. Things are shifting also from west to east. But again, you have the new concept, the Chinese concept and all of this, which is coming to play and will help a different global trade cycle. Now, for the growth cycle, we know that energy and resources is the only potential drivers of growth. It existed throughout our years. If you look back in the history, you find those two are the most dominating factors of any growth. If you have energy which is weak and you have resources which is weak, economy become weak. Simple as that. The rule of the thumb does not apply. In history, the rule of the thumb was when there is a product which is especially oil, if it's scarce, the price will go up. It's no longer that. It's different cycle. Because economy shift happened too big. And therefore, it has. When you look at the Middle East, we still, when you look at our, we need 290 years of proven reserves in the Middle East. It's almost the clear basin of oil. Huge potential, oil and gas. Some of it discovered, some of it is not discovered. But this is important also, how the oil will transpire in years to come, when there is still will remain the highest in the global energy mix, no change to that. And this is important for how this region needs to develop its strategy, long-term thinking capability and ability. It's very important. Furthermore, when you look at the UAE or GCC, you find that we're still in the high with regard to consumption. Our countries are growing in consumption, and this is quite drastic growth because of the expansion of development and so on. And it also impacts negatively the GDP, because the more you grow, the more expenditure you have in infrastructure and other. And with the low oil income, that becomes imbalance. And you have to find different modem to find that money. And this is what worries some people who think about why we should develop a different cycle of development or diversification of our economy. Now, some of that diversification is happening as we speak, because the GCC countries decided that we're going to grow our petrochemical and chemical production, which is a sign of a great decision. It's very important. We have the resource and we have the refining capacity, and then we can ship out a produced product rather than ship the barrel of oil and then it's produced externally, then they send it back to us in product. So this dynamics of change are important. Also, when you look at the investment in human capital, technology and innovation, it's quite tremendous in here is happening at this moment. People are talking about it, people are implementing it, countries are moving towards it, and this is important. But we still have to watch that petrochemical is the second largest after oil and is going to grow beyond oil income. And this is important, how the growth will happen. Furthermore, offshore energy will remain. I know there is investment no longer there in it, but in our view there is continuous requirement of a global oil will stay. No change to the oil mix, as I said earlier on. Still 70 to 80% will remain as oil. And therefore, offshore oil will become just as critical as it was in earlier years, because it is important. Although some companies moved back from offshore oil and did not invest, I think companies will go back to investing in offshore oil. And this is a good sign for the service provider and others who will find ways to create the opportunity required. Now, let's talk a little bit about the initiative, the 21st Maritime Silk Road. This is a critical one because it's a different dynamics. It changed. And I know people don't like change. It's strange that China thought of it, but nevertheless, it's the right approach. China, for the first time, is thinking globally in a different scale. So therefore, having such a new route process will not only help create opportunities, it will actually build new infrastructure where it doesn't exist today. Just think about the train that runs from China all the way to Southampton. Think how that was done. It actually rejuvenated and will lots of the old towns and old cities or whatever that the train we know in the European economy was the biggest driver of economy at one stage. Then the plane came and the sea transport or inner what they call it, river transport. But the reality, the train is still the best mode of transporting. And this is important to look at the future and how this will do. But nevertheless, the seaborne will continue as the highest, 80 to 90% of the global trade will continue as a seaborne process. And our region will be a critical area of that, especially eastern coast of the UAE, all the coastline of Saudi Arabia, and the Red Sea, and without a doubt, the next bonanza will happen, it will be Greece. That's where the central point of logistics for all seaborne to be placed for going to Europe, west and east of Europe. It's quite a classic thought process, which I think is implemented. COSCO has already started taking some boards management in Greece and looking at different logistic areas, and this is important to build. And as you know, Chinese like to control rather than just do the normal business. With that, ladies and gentlemen, we have to look at the future. Innovation of the future is massive. Depends. Mr. Roy spoke about it critically. And I think, yes, we're not there yet. Or we don't want to know what to be. The what to be is a totally different picture than today, whether we like it or not. It's a creative of new energy, creative of new financial system, creative of a lot of intriguing capability of human mind and his ability to think beyond. Thinking within the box never serve anybody. Beyond the box, outside of the box is the one. So the future, although I said who's afraid of the future is there. The future doesn't need you to make it. It'll make itself. The question is, are you willing to get into that train and be part of the future? Or let the train pass you and you start thinking, what can I do, as they say. But nevertheless, with that, I thank you very much. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you, sir, for enlightening us with these kind words of wisdom and also giving us insight into the future of the maritime industry with Maritime 2030 and beyond. Ladies and gentlemen, the conference is now officially open. Can we have a loud round of applause for that? Thank you. Undoubtedly, it is in wake of such occasions wherein we get an opportunity to get valuable insight and learn the trade of our industry. Thus, today and tomorrow, we will have presentations from experts in various fields to provide us insight on various fascinating and deliberate topics. I hope you will enjoy today's session. Before we start the elaborate paper presentation session, let me first brief you on the nature of the conference. First day of conference is scheduled into 4 sessions where we will have total 11 papers presentation today. The time duration for each presentation will be 20 minutes followed by a 10-minute question and answer session. So since the event is being telecasted live, I would request all the speakers to kindly stick to the time provided. Before we start our first session, here is a small mention of our sponsors. Platinum sponsors is Kuwait Oil Tanker Company. Gold sponsor is Jabir Al Khalid Shipping LLC. Principal sponsor American Bureau of Shipping. Registration area sponsor is Elk Salto Emirates Marine in Equipments. Badge and lanyard sponsors is Luke Oil Company. Award sponsors is Cadmatic Software Solutions. Associate sponsor is Gulf Navigation Holdings, Halul Offshore, Al Barwadi Daman, Total Lube Marine, Foresight Limited, Middle East Marine, Denora, Forsam, and Inter-Ocean Ship Repair Limited. So without any further ado, let's start the presentation. To chair the first 3 sessions of the conference, I request Mr. Unnikrishnan Nair, Principal Surveyor, ABS, to please join us on stage. Mr. Unnikrishnan Nair is the Principal Surveyor of American Bureau of Shipping. In his present work, he works closely in class certification and close out of outstanding issues. He is working with American Bureau of Shipping, a leading marine and offshore classification society. Sir, I welcome you to ShipTech and request you to kindly hand over the dice and proceed with the session. I welcome you, sir.
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. We begin today morning with the first paper, which will be presented by Mr. Jamil Al-Ali, who is the manager, Fleet Engineering Group, Kuwait Oil Tanker Company, KOTC. Mr. Jamil Al-Ali joined KOTC in the year 1985 on scholarship program and later joined the company fleet vessels in 1988 and sailed until 2002, serving in all the ranks up to chief engineer. Mr. Jamil had sailed on board all classes of vessels in the KOTC fleet, which included crude oil tankers, products, and LPG between 1988 and 2002. He joined KOTC company head office in 2002, worked in Fleet Engineering Group until 2012, and since then heading KOTC Fleet New Building Projects Group. Please welcome Mr. Jamil Al-Ali. Thank you, sir.
Thank you. Oops. I think this morning it's first of all it's a great pleasure to be here among many familiar faces in the industry. I think the two keynote speakers have already shed light on the many challenges that the industry is facing. For my presentation, I will try to share with you from KOTC's insight in what we're trying to do regarding the environmental challenges. We cannot cover in great detail all the challenges because there are so many. However, hopefully I can shed some light on environmental at least. And the topics I will hope to cover today are the environmental hazards, pollution sources, protection measures, ways of reducing our carbon footprint or CO2 emissions, energy management, which KOTC is now well on our way towards getting ISO 50001 for energy management system, and environmental benchmarking, performance benchmarking. Just to highlight the potential sources of pollution from ships, greenhouse gases from human sources, the four major contributors to greenhouse gases, carbon dioxide emissions from the various sectors, and VOCs, volatile organic compounds. Here is a simple graphic representation of, when we talk about emissions, we're talking mainly CO2, which is a greenhouse gas, SOx and NOx also, which is the talk of the industry at the moment, with the 2020 deadline approaching, which we heard about earlier on, and the challenge of providing suitable fuel available worldwide, and the challenges. We run our fleets with diesel engines that don't like to run on diesel anymore. So that in itself is a challenge. Also VOCs from oil tankers, apart from ballast water, invasive species, etc. Now, human sources of the greenhouse gases, as we mentioned before, CO2, methane, nitrous oxide, and of course fluorinated gases used for refrigerants, etc. Now, people would say that shipping only contributes a small percentage in total of the greenhouse gases. Therefore, why should we care too much? Why should we focus on such reducing our CO2 footprint? Now, there's different schools of thought. However, the regulators have a different opinion. They are making us obliged. I mean, with the onset of MRV, first of all, the EU's initiative, followed by the IMO initiative 1 year later, make us obliged. This is the first step, is to announce what CO2 emissions we are emitting to the environment, and then what comes later, whether it's a tax on CO2, whether it's carbon trading, that will follow. But at the moment, we are obliged to start announcing through the MRV scheme what we're actually emitting to the environment. And this is just highlighting VOCs, volatile organic compounds. Now, although a VLCC losing a lot of vapors to the atmosphere, apart from the effect it's having on the atmosphere, it's also a loss of cargo. However, charter parties allow for a certain percentage which usually is not exceeded. So although I've written here financial loss, generally it's not the case. However, the effect is happening on the environment, I think in the future this is likely to be more and more focus point of regulators, IMO and others. So the VOC is here mentioned: methane, ethane, propane, butane, pentane, hexane. In KOTC, we've already taken some steps to reduce our VOC emissions to the environment. The DVOC system is a system by DSME. The ships were built in DSME that have this system, and this is reducing the VOCs that evolve during loading. When you load at a fast rate and this volume of cargo is dropping 30 meters, typically on a VLCC, to the bottom of the tank, as you can imagine, a lot of gases evolve, VOCs. Also, during sea voyages, we have a VOCON system. The VOCON system deals with reducing VOC emissions to the environment during passage. And one step on from that is the MARVOC, which actually modulates that valve instead of being open-closed or on-off type of mode. Then, of course, ballast water treatment, another contentious issue in the industry. We have also taken the step of having fixed emission monitoring equipment installed on our latest vessels, and also for bilge separators, instead of the traditional oily water separator, we have tried to go one step beyond with dynamic separators. This slide is demonstrating the difference between the conventional drop line or loading, where the cargo drops to the bottom of the tank, the gases are evolved. With this DVOC system, you have anti-cavitation control valve, which actually modulates, and by modulating reduces the evolved gases. as demonstrated in this slide. And this is results from our measurement showing how much the actual reduction of VOCs evolved to the environment are in the range of 53 to 87. Of course, that's a big range. However, mainly the type of cargo, the loading rate, and other factors would be the controlling factor. And here also demonstrating the Vocon valve, which is reducing the emissions during the voyage. This is by a Danish company called Pressback, and KOTC entered into a joint industry project along with Pressback. Intention of the project was to further develop the system in order to actually measure and regulate the emissions which are given off during the voyage, which maybe as a percentage of the total cargo is not very high, but actually in terms of volume is quite substantial, and especially its impact on the environment. So as we talked about before, MARVOC is the system which is installed controlling the Vocon valve, and we fitted monitoring equipment where we actually measure, and the data is passed to ourselves and to the manufacturer, where the intention is to further develop the system for improved performance. I will not go too much into ballast water treatment. Our latest new building vessels, which were delivered in 2014, 9 vessels in total, all have ballast water treatment system, which is in line with KOTC's policy to be ahead of the game where it comes to regulation. Instead of simply meeting the regulation prior to ratification, we took the brave step, you could call it, to move ahead with such requirements. This is just showing our fixed emission monitoring system, which has the ability to measure NOx, SOx, CO2, and particulate matter. This is in line with TMSA, Tanker Management Self-Assessment, where in order for a company to elevate itself to a higher level, it is required to continuously monitor emissions. And is debatable whether a portable emission monitoring device can do the job, or for continuous monitoring we should have a fixed emission monitoring system. However, in our latest vessels, KOTC opted for fixed emission monitoring. This is just demonstrating the ballast water treatment and dynamic oil-to-water separators. Instead of 15 parts per million, it's 5 parts per million capability. From the new building stage, we do extensive model testing, and the intention is to build ships which are more efficient and adopt certain power-saving solutions. Reducing fuel consumption, we look at energy-saving devices such as pre-swell stator, vortex generator, ducted ducted propellers, optimized hull lines, optimized bow design, and in order to decide on what is best for the vessel from the pre-design stage, or during the design stage, we do independent lab tests in a tow tank in Sweden, SSBA in Sweden, and that is in collaboration with the shipyard to bring shipyard on board. Apart from that, small savings are possible with the aerodynamic design of the superstructure. Also LED lights reduce power consumption. Every little bit counts. Also variable speed frequency converter for seawater pumps. Why should the seawater pump run at full speed when it's not required? So there's significant power saving by using variable speed, especially for the big pumps, which are the main seawater cooling pumps. KOTC embarked on energy management project. The first phase has already been completed, and now we're well on our way for the second phase, which I shall elaborate on. One of the biggest challenges to implement energy management is to get all the key people on board. People resist change, so and if they don't see the exact benefit of saving energy or energy management, then that in itself is a challenge. So it's across the board. The various different functions within a company need to realize the importance. And now for us, for example, our whole fleet is on time charter to our mother company, KBC. So people will say, charter provides the fuel, why should we care too much? And if it's about the environment, what's the difference whether we burn 90 tons or 85 tons or etc. However, apart from our social responsibility to protect the environment, it also affects our bottom line. Since although the charter is paying for the fuel, if the mechanism adopted, our mother company pays us market rates. So when the market is down, we also suffer. There's no easy ride for us also. However, if you manage to consume less fuel, we can that way optimize our charter rates. And at times when we need, such as now, that is ever more increasingly important. The first phase of our energy management project was setting the baseline. EEDI is the IMO's initiative. We used also sea trial data, comparing old with new vessels of the same class, VLCCs in this case. Comparing theoretical saving from the design stage, such as model tests, with the actual saving in service. Also, operational data was used. Now, the energy management involves a company setting a strategy, anchoring, organizational anchoring, energy management measures, performance managing, and we did also a gap analysis towards the ISO 50001 in order to see what would be required in order to achieve the ISO certification for energy management. And then we moved on to the second phase. Second phase was interesting since it involved benchmarking with other regional players to see where we are, regional and international players, comparing baselines. Also, we had to bring on board the charterers. The easiest way to save fuel is to slow down, as you're very much aware. Also, we plan to implement software, which is the Eco Insight software, which will also help us towards reaching the MRV target of the IMO, of the EU, and then later the IMO. Our shipboard energy management plans, of course, we have had these for a long time. However, IMO never gave any specific guidelines on what should be involved in such energy management plan. Therefore, as many companies, that management plan was a plan put on board, not necessarily helping us to become more efficient. So now, with our drive towards energy efficiency, we have rewritten the shipboard energy management plans, the SEAM, to actually make a difference to the results. This is showing the cross-functional task, because it cannot be done, we cannot do it in the office without the ship staff. The main hands-on people are the ship staff. So bringing ship staff on board, letting them see the benefit, letting them buy into the whole, let's say, initiative made by KOTC is important, along with bringing on board, our charterers. This is showing various different means of energy efficiency, waste heat recovery, which is ever more challenging since engines have become more efficient. There's less waste heat to extract. Therefore, we see more and more elaborate systems to try and get every last drop of this waste heat and make use of it for power generation, basically free power generation during sea voyages. And the potential has been highlighted here between 2 and 7%. Propulsion enhancing devices, improvement devices, such as we talked of ducted propellers, vortex generators, pre-swell stators, can contribute anywhere between 4 and 7%. The best possible hull coatings maybe between 1 and 3, but then when it comes to hull coatings, it's more of not only the quality of the coating that's important, it's how you manage when you take a ship out of service to clean the hull, how long the idle periods, etc. So it requires to be actually managed. This slide, at least the fuel, the cost of the fuel here is 600 tons. That shows this is an old slide. However, by installing this pre-swell stator on these vessels on VLCCs, we managed to achieve 4% reduction in fuel, and over a voyage of 34 days, that then worked out around $81,000. Today's rate, if fuel is somewhere between 200, floating between the 200-300 mark, so less than half of that, but still substantial figure even in today's fuel cost. And with charter rates the way they are, every little is valuable. This is showing the various possibilities and comparison between energy-saving devices, the pre-swell stator and the ducted propeller. So 4 to 6% are typical, shown at the model stage, model testing stage, which is the design stage, and then later on confirmed in actual when the vessels were put into service. These are showing some measures for also towards energy efficiency and potential savings, where weather routing, voyage planning can contribute between 1 and 3%, speed management 3 to 5%. So, as we said earlier, slowing down is probably one of the most effective ways, hence slow steaming has become very popular. Trim optimization, there is a potential saving there, although lesser percentage. Hull and propeller cleaning, if you manage your hull condition or hull cleaning in an optimal way, then there's a great potential there also. Engine boiler usage and performance also. Low load running of main engine, efficient use of consumers. So total saving here between 8 and 16.5%. This is just going back to ISO 50001, and the principle followed is similar to other ISO systems, where it is based on a plan, do, check. So you're continuously checking the results and seeing how to adjust accordingly in order to further enhance the saving and the potential from such a management system. We touched on the MRV earlier. So, this is one of our focus areas, and we expect to submit by end of August for approving our plan. Environmental benchmarking, which we touched on earlier, where we were involved along with the DMVGL and major leading ship operators worldwide were involved, along with some regional leaders like Natco and Jesco, Mideast, Bahri. Of course, on a confidential basis, but you manage to know that there are major players there, and you can see where you have achieved well or less compared to others. The benchmarking looked at various aspects: environmental management, environmental policy, emission reduction measures, ballast water treatment, biofouling management, sludge waste, etc., emergency preparedness and contingency planning, hazardous materials, environmental research, ship recycling, training and awareness. And with that brings me to the end of the presentation. Thank you very much. If anybody has any questions. Please.
And the fact that the fuel that we are looking at is not available. Did you consider using LNG as a fuel? And to anybody in this room, are we looking at LNG as a fuel in terms of bunkering? Because just changing the engine is not good enough, but what about bunkering around the world? I think I'm aware Singapore is doing a lot, but what about this region?
Yes, we did consider the alternative fuels, including LNG. However, since we run LPG vessels, and since one of the challenges towards implementing LNG is the actual the lack of global infrastructure, so then we got excited about possibility of LPG as fuel. Since the source of the LPG can be from the cargo, especially for our LPG vessels. Unfortunately, the time when we were looking at that, LPG was on the bottom of list of priorities, although it was in the plan for testing. However, the focus was more on LNG. And LNG, as we said, one of the challenges was the availability of infrastructure as well as the commercial aspect. So as of yet, we have not gone for dual fuel or LNG as fuel. However, in the near future, who knows?
But do you see any potential in that as innovation? Do you see big ships changing to dual fuel?
It is an exciting prospect. I don't see it happening in the near future. Maybe by 2030 things may be different. At the moment, I think there's a lot of challenges. Even when we talk about emissions, you switch to LNG as fuel, and depending on which manufacturer you select for your main engine, you still need selective catalytic reduction, which to me means as if we missed the target. I mean, one of the benefits of LNG fuel should be cleaner fuel, and with that, still you have to treat the emissions. So these are just a few of the challenges, technical challenges to be considered before adopting LNG, apart from the bigger problem of the lack of global infrastructure. Any further questions? Or can I rest my case? Thank you. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen.
Thank you very much, sir. That was very interesting, and we all learned something from that. The next speaker is Debashish Bose. He's the fleet manager for D&K Holding. Mr. Debashish Bose is a graduate from DMET, Calcutta, and a postgraduate in business management from IIM Calcutta. Throughout his career, he has sailed on large crude carriers and has sailed as a chief engineer for 4 years. He joined as a superintendent in Philadelphia between 1988 and 2001. Thereafter was in Abu Dhabi as an engineering superintendent. Then moved to Glasgow for 2 years between 2004 and 6, before joining D&K in 2006. It's our pleasure to welcome Debashish. And I think we're just spot on time. If we can stick to our schedule, that would be good. Thank you, Debashish.
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Yeah, that's good. So which one is this? Right one. Okay. Okay, today I'm going to speak about the sulfur cap, 0.5%, which is having its own challenges. Now, we all are aware that 70th session of IMO was held in 2016, October, where an unanimous agreement has been reached for 0.5% sulfur cap. And they also reached that they will allow to continue heavy oil to be burnt in the ship, provided it meets the standard, like scrubbers or alternate whatever systems can be fitted to bring down it to 0.5%. Now, IMO has done this study, but Energy System Incorporated, which was backed by BIMCO and IPSIA, which is an association for oil and gas industry, they found that the 0.5 sulfur cap, 0.5% fuel cannot be supplied by 2020 for the demand which will be there. About 250 to 300 million metric tons will be additionally required. In fact, ICS has also confirmed that IMO is going to take a political decision rather than a factual, realistic scenario. Now, what are the consequences? Does this sulfur cap make a sense? I am putting it across to you all. NGOs and scientists fear that in shipping 0.5% sulfur cap is 500% more than 0.001% of diesel car. Now, how much does it make sense? A car can carry maximum half a ton of luggage or whatever it is. And a ship, let's take an MR, can carry 50,000 tons of cargo. So 26,000. So basically I'm talking of the major fleet, that is the bulk, tanker, gas, container. 26,000 ships. Will it pollute more than 1 million cars or 10 million cars? Also, the whole industry agrees that bringing in this sulfur cap will negatively impact the whole industry, which everyone is agreeing to it, but still we are planning to go ahead with it. Now, high sulfur exhaust counters the CO2 greenhouse effect, which everyone is aware of it. Because the cloud seeding is done by sulfur. And I will just take you through it. How sulfur dioxide helps you to reduce or cool down the planet by forming a compound called DMSP, which is dimethyl sulfonopropionate. Now, DMSP is released from the algae slowly over the time close to the surface and acts as a sunscreen. Now, most of us, whenever they go to the beaches or close to the ocean, gets that ocean smell. That is this compound, DMSP or DMS. Now, that is not going to be dwarfed by our pollution. And actually, that is what is producing the clouds and, in effect, cooling down the planet. Now, another aspect is the more CO2 we release, and ocean acts as a sink for the carbon dioxide by forming carbonic acid. Now, if this carbonic acid exceeds the saturation point, then all the corals, marine life, and everything starts getting extinct. So this is one aspect of it also. Now, the third thing is when CO2 is when the CO2 is there in the air, and when too much of CO2 is there, the marine organism, the shells, which takes the CO2 from the carbonic acid and forms the hard shell. Because of the acidification, this stops generating and then the CO2 level keeps on increasing. Now, if also the first great extinction has taken place because of CO2 acidification of ocean, and which apparently happened when Appalachian Mountains uplifted, and that sucked in the CO2 which was causing the acidification, and the reverse process took place. A global ice age came, suddenly ice age came in, and everything got extinct. Now, the thing is, our planet is now facing a CO2 problem. Now, this CO2 problem, we are thinking by reducing sulfur dioxide, we can control the carbon dioxide, which I don't think, because reducing sulfur dioxide will accelerate the heating of the planet, and which will accelerate the acidification. That was one aspect. Now, the cost and challenges of sulfur reduction. Also, refining 250 to 300 million metric ton of 0.5 sulfur will increase the CO2 emission. However, we have to go ahead with it because now it is going to become a law. So owners have only few options, which are good as well as bad. We have options like fitting LNG engines, scrubbers, or having modern technology to run 0.5% sulfur. But there is no technology yet been proven which can operate on 0.1 to 0.5% of sulfur continuously. This will cost you additional investment, a recovery time, can't say with the kind of charter rates going on. Another operational aspect is there. The crews are not trained to operate this kind of system. What will happen to that? Now, vessels switching permanently from heavy fuel oil to low sulfur fuel instead of using the scrubber will, at least as of today, whatever technology is there, will face a problem. And we all are aware when we enter into SECA, at least 5% of incident which has taken place while changing over from heavy oil to low sulfur fuel oil because of asphaltene clogging of the filter. Now this, we have yet not found any solution for it, but this will continue to increase. Then another aspect is the forces and the stress which will come from burning of low sulfur fuel, because it will be injected lower than 100 degrees centigrade. And then the lube oil thing is there, which many companies are coming up with high BN or low BN number, but everything has to be proven. We are also in one of our new ship, one of the major lubricant producer is trying to establish how our engine functions. We are still in that process. Let's see what will be the outcome. Incompatibility of fuel always remain. Blending will be a major issue. Then most of the ports will not be able to supply the required LSFO because of the logistical issues. This has to be also considered. Conclusion. We all know in shipping consensus is very poor. because everyone is only interested in their own kind of trade, which is very well written in one of the article by one of the brokers as scrap game of ship owners. And in my personal view, in coming 10 to 15 years, traditional or small ship owners will totally become extinct, because in today's market it is very difficult to survive for a small shipping company or a traditional company with less than 20 odd ships. Another thing is, the legislation is moving too fast. Any ship is built at least for 20 to 25 years. Now, if a ship is built today, will it be able to comply after 5 years, after 10 years, after 15 years, after 20 years? So that remains a big question mark. Then the cost, logistics, other things are there. And as I have been telling, the proven robust technology for low sulfur cap is still not available, and that will be leading into a mess in shipping company if IMO decides in 2020 to bring in 0.5% of fuel cap. With this, I will say thank you very much. Any question? Okay.
Thank you, Debashish. Our next speaker is Simon Zoe, who's a principal engineer in ABS. Simon is the senior engineering specialist with ABS and was relocated to Dubai in June 2015. He currently heads the machinery team in the ABS Dubai engineering office. During his 8 years experience in ABS Singapore, Simon was the lead machinery engineer for numerous OSVs, offshore conversion projects for FPSOs and FSOs, classed in the Pacific Division. He has also been involved in the classing of turret and swivel mooring systems. Simon is also the subject matter expert for the Pacific Division in classing of underwater systems. So if anybody has got any underwater system questions, he's the man to ask. Please welcome Simon. Where's Simon? He was here. Not there? There was a question and answer session, but no. Yeah. What's up, Daniel? Yeah, I think there was a break scheduled at this time, so probably he stepped out. He's here, but so would everybody want a break, or we'll go ahead with Simon? We'll have a break? Okay, let's take a break and then we'll have Simon here. Thanks.
Thank you, sir. With that, we end with the first session. Before we move to the short tea break, I would like to take a few minutes to mention our main sponsors. Platinum sponsors, Kuwait Oil Tanker Company. Gold sponsor, Jawar Al Khalid Shipping LLC. Principal sponsor, American Bureau of Shipping. Registration area sponsor, Exalto, Emirates Marine Equipment. Badge and Lanyard sponsor, Luke Oil Company. Award sponsor, Cadmatic Software Solutions. Associate sponsor, Gulf Navigation Holdings, Halul Offshore, Al Baradi Daman, Total Lube Marine, Foresight Limited, Middle East Marine, Denora, Five Oceans Ship Repair and Marine Service Repair LLC, and Inter-Ocean Ship Repair LLC. We move to the tea break. We kindly request all the guests to move to the foyer area and enjoy your tea. We shall resume our conference in 20 minutes. See you all soon.
It's okay.
I request all the guests to kindly be seated as we are about to start the second session.
Okay, welcome back. I think we are a little bit behind schedule. This was supposed to be at 10:50. We've got 2 more sessions before the question and answer session can start. So first will be done by Simon, and then will be by Mr. Anil. I will repeat Simon's write-up. Simon Zhu is the Senior Engineering Specialist with ABS and was relocated to Dubai in June 2015. He currently heads the machinery team in ABS Dubai Engineering Office. During his 8 years in ABS Singapore, Simon was the lead machinery engineer for numerous OSVs and offshore conversion projects for FPSOs and FSOs based in the Pacific Division. He has also been involved in the classing of turret and swivel mooring systems. Simon is also the subject matter expert for the Pacific Division for classing of underwater systems. Please welcome Simon.
So, good morning, everybody. I hope everybody had a good tea break. Okay, without much ado, let's get right into the presentation. So we heard a few speakers this morning talking about new regulatory compliances. So today we're going to only focus on one particular aspect, and that is EU MRV. So MRV stands for Monitoring, Reporting and Verification Scheme. So the EC has actually published the proposal for CO2 emissions monitoring, calling it the MRV regulation on June the 28th, 2013. So this regulation basically entered into force 1st July 2015, but the first reporting period will only start on 1st January 2018. So in essence, this particular regulation affects ship owners, in particular those that are running bigger fleets, say tankers above 5,000 gross tons. So the threshold of 5,000 gross tons was actually selected because it was aimed at avoiding administrative burdens on the small and medium-sized ships which do not produce significant emissions. So it is meant as a starting point, and for that reason they had chosen 5,000 gross tons as the benchmark. So what this essentially means is we may potentially see this being moved on to the other smaller vessels in time to come. So companies for each of their ships falling under this scope or under the jurisdiction of EU MRV regulations will need to, according to this timeline you can see, according to the timeline, by 31st August 2017, they need to submit to what they call a qualified verifier, a monitoring plan for each of their ships. So they allow separate plans. So the MRV, the monitoring plan, can be split into two sections essentially. First section may be company related, which covers generic components across their entire fleet, and a part 2, which is ship specific. And from 1st January 2018, CO2 emissions must be monitored for each ship on a per voyage basis and an annual basis. And they are assessed on the proposed and approved monitoring plan. So flag state and port state authorities will check on the ship's compliance via port state inspections, whilst the European Commission will publish an annual report on emissions from the maritime transport industry to inform the public and also allow an assessment of the emission data collected and the energy efficiency of the maritime transportations. So they propose also to categorize them by different ship types and sizes, as well as routes. So what can we do essentially to prepare for the upcoming regulation? So in essence, in preparation for this EU MRV compliance, we first need to identify the applicable CO2 monitoring approaches that you wish to apply for your entire fleet. We need to review the procedures in place for collection of the fuel oil consumption and activity data. So a little bit more on this particular aspect on fuel oil consumption and management later on in the presentation. We also need to develop data flow charts which identify the risk associated, develop control measures to mitigate any of those identified risks in the previous step, and develop measures that we need to fill data gaps. We will also look at some common data gaps coming up. So we also do offer ABS MRV, which is monitoring and MRV verification services. Okay, so we'll look a bit more into that as well. So first, the monitoring plan. So what exactly is a monitoring plan? All monitoring plans should consist of the following 6 parts that we can see on the screen, and they should be categorized by category. On part A being the record of revisions, what has been done. Do you update your plans and what do you do? So this keeps a clear log or clear history record on how the plan was modified. Part B, basic data. We need company information, ships information, the type of fuel that you're taking in. C, activity data, where the ship is trading, the amount of fuel oil consumed, the voyage distances, time, what kind of cargo we carried. So cargo, because we talked earlier that the EC is actually categorizing the results according to the ship type, the type of cargo you carry. So the purpose of having clear definitions of each of these terms is to allow the EC to produce meaningful reports. So D, data gaps. We have already identified, or rather it has already been identified, a few common data gaps which we need to pay attention when we're developing the plan. Management processes such as the periodic review of the monitoring plan, whether it's effective, whether there are items that can be improved. The data validity, any corrections that were made and corrective actions to be taken, what the results of that, and any other further information. So currently it is voluntary reporting. The monitoring plan should allow for the monitoring and reporting of fuel oil consumption and CO2 emitted on the basis of voluntary criteria. So voluntary monitoring currently ongoing. It's about to become mandatory. This will make it possible to better understand the average reported across the entire sector, because each company uses their vessels differently. They trade along different routes. They carry different types of cargo. So it will make it possible to understand the average reported energy efficiency by meaningful reporting of data or collection of data. So what exactly do we submit when you submit the plan? What exactly are your verifiers supposed to do? So companies may refer to the existing procedures and controls covered by the EN standard and ISO standards listed up there. Companies shall submit at least the below information, which is relevant documentation, data logs, information which you have collected via your collection means. And assessment of monitoring data plans includes DAS assessment, means technical office approval, theoretical assessments, and site visits, so on-site inspections. So what possible causes of few measurement inconsistencies do we get? We are just told to measure, but what can actually affect our measurement results? How do we know whether everybody is measuring along a common standard or common framework? So IMO has also released certain guidelines for it, but there are certain possible causes for fuel oil management inconsistencies that we have highlighted over here. One pertaining to the equipment. So any type of equipment, tools, sensors that you need to accomplish this measurement, they are made by different manufacturers. So we may have different readings even on the same ship if you use a different type of equipment. Some processes, the methods which you're applying, fuel oil measurement methods corresponding specific requirements, the policies, procedures, when do you start monitoring? Do you wait for it to reach an equilibrium state, steady state before you start logging the data? Or do you think that it is more accurate to start data logging right on the onset so you can plot the entire curve of the data monitoring? So the people involved, anyone involved with the process of fuel oil measurement and data handling, basically it goes back to having across the same fleet, you're looking at the same sister vessel with the same equipment, but the people involved may be reporting it differently because of the way they utilize the equipment to measure and data log. So material could be also the different bunker you're taking from different regions. Environment conditions, did this particular vessel meet with certain weather conditions along the way? Did he take any extra diversion? Did he speed up because he was late, etc.? So management, basically how all these, a combination of these factors, how were they handled at that time? So this is just a fishbone chart that we have plotted out, which can eventually lead to failure to measure the fuel oil consumption correctly. Basically, it gives inconsistent results. And these are some of the factors that we're highlighting. So what can we adopt as monitoring approaches to maintain a better set of data? So 4 possible approaches to CO2 emission monitoring. One is to document so that you can tell whether the inconsistencies were due to engine performance or purely due to bunker. So bunker delivery notes, maintaining the records of your bunker delivery notes, which dates they were on. Fuel tank monitoring, the volume of fuel, the quality of the fuel. Flow meters for applicable combustion processes. Were you speeding up? Were you going above what you would have deemed as the optimal? Direct emission measurement. So was there some fault with your measurement systems? So the key challenge is, actually we have highlighted it, the trade-off between acceptable accuracy. How do you get accurate data, yet make it simple enough for your crew or your staff to implement it? And how do you maintain? What is the cost of getting very accurate equipment, training your staff to survive or to economically in this today's market? How do you economically keep up and fulfill the regulations, at the same time maintain an accurate set of data? So we talked about 2 different types of monitoring that we need to undergo. One is on a per voyage basis, and one as a company holistically reporting to your flag states on an annual basis. So the annual emission report should contain the parameters of the second column. So it's more a tabulated kind of data that presents meaningful information on an annual basis. And your per voyage basis would be the benchmark for you to check whether your data measurement points are consistent. Are there any corrective measures or actions needed to be taken to refine this particular data set collected? So cargo carried, we talked also about the monitoring plan needing to cover the specific vessel types, the type of cargo you are carrying for that particular voyage. So this is a table that was developed by ABS to summarize the requirements. They are actually laid down in Annex 2 of the EU MRV regulations, and we have just summarized it in the table for easy reference. Port of call. So this determines which places, when the regulation goes into force, are mandatory for monitoring. So a port of call under the jurisdiction of a member state recently extended to the European Economic Area. So that's EU, Iceland, and Norway. The scope of the MRV would not only be limited to these areas, but would possibly also apply to some other territories outside of Europe. So currently we have a list which does not apply. So not the list that applies. So does not apply. We talked about the 6 different categories or parts that should be contained in your monitoring plan, and that translates to what is expected to be seen in the report that you submit to your flag states for reporting purposes. What are the verifiers' roles when we check the reports? The company shall provide the verifier with the supporting information. So verifiers are like companies like ABS, which was actually the first classification society to be accredited as a certified verifier. So these companies shall provide the verifiers with supporting information, basically your voyage plan, your trading routes, where has this ship been, a copy of the emissions report from the previous year, if appropriate, and a copy of the monitoring plans submitted or applied. Any changes were applied compared to the last reporting cycle. Companies shall also provide the following information: the copies of the ship's official logbook and the oil record book, if they were separate copies, bunkering documents, and as applicable, verifiers may ask the company to provide the structure. How is the company managing the workflow, the monitoring process? How are they going about gathering the data and sorting it out to make it a meaningful set for submission? The verifier shall also consider areas of higher verification risk, inherent risk, control risk, and detection risk. We talked about it earlier. The verifier shall draft a verification plan, including as a minimum the following: programs which describe the verification activities, the time and the manner which this verification will be carried out. As we talked about, there are 2 sections. There's a technical review and a site inspection. So how do we coordinate them? Verification data activities include data verification and site visits. So verifiers need to be accredited by the National Accreditation Body pursuant to the EC Regulation number 765/2008. Verifiers are responsible for the main tasks as follows. They need to assess the monitoring plans in compliance with the regulation, and after which they need to verify the collected emission report. So the emission report is based on is data that is collected based on the monitoring plan which was developed and approved. And thereafter, satisfactory review of the report, we will issue a document of compliance, which is mandatory. And after each issuance of the document DOC, we need to report it to the flag states for consolidation. So, list of issues for development of guidance documents. So this we're talking about the gaps, a couple of the gaps we talked about earlier, determination of ground traveled, etc. So some common faults that we see, or common variations across the other reports when we're doing verifications for the companies. So, and this we summarize is because of the ABS experience that we had. So leading up to the present phase, from the onset of MRV implementation, ABS has been involved in several different types of activities. We have participated in the European Sustainable Shipping Forum.